Hi! Welcome back to my channel. My name's Renee. I like to read books and then talk about them on the internet. Happy New Year! Happy 2024! I hope that you've all had a great break if you've had one, and that your year has started off amazingly, and that it continues that way. It is that time of the year, top books for 2023. We're getting into it. It is a hard task to have to sit in this chair and think about favourite books of the year. It's hard to decide. It's hard to think about why they're favourites. It's hard to think about what to say about them that I haven't already said. It's not easy. I get very nervous about this. I have 10 books, 10 top books of the year, and then I have also a few honourable mentions that I will just quickly mention off the bat. But before I do that, I also just really want to say a big thank you to everyone who has watched my channel this year. It's always really amazing and blows me away how many people watch me talk about books on the internet. But I feel like in 2023 I gained a new level of confidence when it comes to talking about books. I feel like I've made some really great videos this year that I'm quite proud of. It's all been really fun. Thank you for watching and continuing to watch, I hope. Here's to 2024. More books, more reading, more talking about them on the internet. Now that that's out of the way, let's quickly talk about some books that didn't quite make my list but were pretty up there. First up, what we talk about when we talk about Love by Raymond Carver, a collection of short stories. Very sad, very bleak, set in the Pacific Northwest, I believe. Stories that drop in on characters during poignant times in their lives. Very economical with its words, but filled with a lot of emotion and feeling, and it was like magic reading this. Next I have Whereabouts by Jhumpa Lahiri, a quiet novel about a woman who is going about her every day, describing her inner thoughts and showing us how she is coming to make some important decisions in her life. I really just enjoyed the quiet nature of this book and how we learn about this character through those quiet moments. In the Act by Rachel Ingalls, a really fun, crazy, chaotic short story about a married couple and their unhappiness, the lengths that each of them will go to in order to break free from their unhappiness. So wild, so crazy, so funny, so clever, had everything that I love in a short story, and it's definitely worth the 50 pages that it tells the story in. And then lastly on the honourable mentions list is The Fraud by Zadie Smith, a historical fiction set in 18th century London that tells the sprawling tale of slavery and the social, political atmosphere at the time. Feels very contemporary despite the period it's writing about, and is told through some of my favourite characters that I read this year. The main character, Mrs. Tichborne, is great. I love her so much. Very funny, very dry, very honest. Okay, let us get into the top 10. I am going to do this in no particular order, but I am going to save my favourite book till the very end. First up we have Medea by Euripides, a retelling by Rachel Cusk. Had never read any Greek myth or Greek drama before. This was a brilliant first attempt. It's a contemporary retelling, so I can't speak to the original and how that compares, but I loved this, obviously. I think the way that Cusk is able to write such raw rage and emotion in such few scenes in this story is what really blew me away. It is the story of a marriage and its breakdown, and the often sexist and unfair expectations that are put on women during this traumatic, often experience. The way that a lot of the emotional labour and child rearing is put on women, the criticism that they received. Had some of the best fight scenes between two characters that I've ever read. So rageful, so powerful. I felt the hate that these two characters had for one another. And I would love to see this in production, actually. And I'm excited to read other adaptations, including the original, which I have now. So there you go. The Employees by Olga Ravin. This is a fun, weird, quirky sci-fi told in vignettes. We are on a spaceship of workers that is circling around in space. Half these workers are human, the other half are not human, described as humanoids. The format of this, the interviews, are how we are learning about what it means to be human. These humanoids are learning what it means to be human. Humans are describing sentimental things that they miss about Earth. It's really a story about care. It's a story about capitalism. It's a story about art and the way that that makes us feel. This has a connection to an installation of work. It was originally written for an exhibition for a Danish artist. Her name is Lea Guldati Hestelund, and Olga Ravin originally wrote this book as a piece to go alongside the installation. I love the way that that ties together. I love when art is introduced, and in this it's a further way of exploring human nature, what it means to be human, how humans respond to things, from a perspective of quite like naive, innocent characters. And so it's presented in this really humorous, often silly way. It does this good thing of balancing itself between being heartfelt and also being quite humorous. So you don't ever feel like it leans towards one or the other too much. So therefore it doesn't take itself too seriously. I recommend it to everyone. Women Talking by Miriam Toews. A heavy story that was in the end extremely hopeful for me. In it we have a Mennonite community of women who have been experiencing sexual assault and rape at the hands of men within their community. The men have left for a few days, and the women have come together during this time in order to discuss and decide what it is that they should do in order to move forward. During this period, we see these women grapple with this decision, the weight of this decision. We see them think logically through it. We see the way that they extend forgiveness to certain people within the community, the way that they consider everyone, and the way that discussion and thoughtfulness can really lead to sound decisions to be made within a community. So even though this story has like an absolutely horrific heart to it, it really does offer this really hopeful message. It's about care, it's about community, it's about perseverance, it's about working through massive amounts of trauma in order to make it through to the other side, keep on living, I guess. Permafrost by Eva Baltazar. I read Boulder this year by Eva Baltazar as well, but I much preferred Permafrost. I know that's controversial. So many people talked about how they absolutely loved Boulder, but Permafrost was it for me. This is a DWM character who is really trying to figure out what it is she wants to do with her life, while at the same time dealing with depression, suicidal thoughts, her family, the expectations that they have on her. She does it with this really sarcastic, dark, dry humour that I love. I love when a book takes something dark and turns it into humour. Uses that as a catharsis really in order to get through those horrible, hard, depressing days. Yeah, one of my favourite protagonists, narrators that I've read in a long time that I think could be somewhat relatable to people that laugh through the hard times. I'm a Fan by Sheena Patel. This is, again, another very kind of dark, dry, sarcastic protagonist who is, I guess, trying to figure out who she is, but in comparison to others, particularly through social media. The unnamed narrator in the story is having an affair with a man who is successful, he is beloved in the literary world, and he is also having affairs with multiple women, one of whom the narrator becomes obsessed with why the man is obsessed with her, obsessed with her status. She's an influencer, she's a white influencer. It's obsessed with the way that she performs on the internet and the ways in which she kind of sees through all of that. I think the parts of this book that I really enjoyed the most were the way that the narrator, who is not white, she's brown, is able to kind of separate out the differences between her and this white influencer, and how colonialism has a massive part to play in that. The way that beauty standards are often held towards white beauty standards, and you know, these ideas of like wellness and holistic ways of living are often borrowed from many non-Western cultures. There are all these ways that she is speaking to these incredibly relevant social points throughout the story. She goes there, she's not perfect, she's definitely a flawed character, she treats people not great. I always appreciate an honest depiction of a real person in fictional characters, no matter how horrible they are. It's so much more interesting than reading like a perfectly nice, normal, moralistic person in a book. Yeah, I know a lot of people kind of were put off by how she was, but I don't think that can stop you. I don't think that should stop you from enjoying a book if a character is depicted in an honest way. Beloved by Toni Morrison. I think I had a penchant for like dark, disturbing, heavy books this year, and found them profoundly like beautiful and deeply affecting. Beloved probably being the top of that list, that type of book. It is the story of a mother and her survival through slavery times. The story is really a look back at her history on a plantation, Sweet Home, and how she came to be where she is now. It's a ghost story in a lot of ways, and that's not really learnt until the end, I guess, so maybe that's a spoiler, me telling you that. It's probably not. But Morrison is describing a situation that to some in the book is considered less harmful than what other slaves experienced during this time. The ways in which these people were fed to believe that their situation was better off and that they were actually loved and cared for, and yet it was still a traumatizing and will forever affect these people. It has some of the best sentences that I've ever read. The descriptions of food in this book are just like so delicious and sumptuous and fun. I really, really, really fell in love with Toni Morrison's style of writing, the melodic, sing-songy way that her characters talk is so soothing and inviting, and there's a heartbreak to that as well, because the things that they're describing are horrible, yet they do it in this way that is so almost like self-soothing. I just think that everyone needs to read it. I think everyone needs to read Toni Morrison, but this book is a must, I feel. If an Egyptian Cannot Speak English by Noor Naga. This is a love story told from two perspectives, two alternating perspectives between the two characters. It's talking about two very different experiences of the same situation, the same events being experienced by these two characters as they meet and fall in love and have this quite toxic relationship. And as we slowly learn different things about them, their different histories, their different links to the place that they're in Cairo in Egypt, the different privileges that they both experience. It really is a contrast between these two constantly, and so you get this push and pull of emotions and sympathies towards these characters in this book. It is formatted in a really interesting way where it poses a question before each chapter and then goes into the perspective of each character. And then I thought that the way that this book ended also was just pure brilliance. It's these kinds of like twists or shock endings that I love in fiction, what I want more of, because it just makes you question everything that you've just read and want to go back and reread it. So yeah, I absolutely love this because of the format and the interesting way that it explored identity, love, privilege, trauma. There is so much going on within this love story that I think I haven't ever read before, and it was refreshing in that way to read, although it was quite toxic and at times difficult. I really enjoyed this. East of Eden by John Steinbeck. How on earth do I even begin to talk about this book? It is a classic. It is a biblical story retold again through generations. You have the landscape of California, the Salinas Valley, where these families have chosen to settle, and the different ways that they live their lives, farm the land, their different morals, their different religious beliefs, their different heartbreaks and tragedies, and the ways that they learn about their own histories is explored through this. This is about difficult, extreme relationships with complicated, complex, and interesting characters. I can't really say much more than that, I don't think. I think, like, this is a proper novel. If you want a proper novel, this is what you should be reading. It's fantastic writing. It's sprawling, it's generational, it has some truly evil characters and some truly like wonderful, brilliant, lovable characters. It has plot, it has real moments of characters struggling with their own mortality, their own morality, questioning God and their existence and what it means to be on earth. Like, it asks all those really massive big questions in very fitting and apt ways in these different scenes throughout the story. I loved my experience of reading this. This will definitely be a book that I go back to again and reread. It's 600 pages, but it did not ever feel like I was reading a 600-page novel, and all the detail is important and necessary, and within that you get some really beautiful passages of writing and thought, and you get both. You get the good writing and a really interesting story as well in this one, and I just had the best time working my way through this one. Lucy by Jamaica Kincaid, hands down my favourite protagonist that I've read this year, if not ever. It was so brilliant. It tells the story of Lucy, who is a young girl, moved to New York to nanny for a white rich family. She is from the Caribbean, and it's a coming of age story. And I think at the beginning of the book you wouldn't think this was a coming of age story, but as you work through it, you learn that this confident, self-assured character that Lucy is at the ripe age of 19 is actually still really trying to figure out who she is. particularly in relation to her own mother. The way that she was brought up with brothers differed to her own experience and her own feelings towards men and women. She is this kind of no bullshit character who confidently says what she says and doesn't hesitate. She just has so much confidence about her that it's really, it makes her this standout character amongst all that I've read this year, and why I think about her a lot in this story, a lot. The top book of the year for me has to be How to Loiter in a Turf War by Coco Solid. I read this book back in February, I think, and it has maintained my favourite book for that long. I loved it so much. It is unlike anything that I've ever read before. If you haven't already heard me talk about this book, let me quickly tell you what it's about. It is a novel in many forms. It is set in Auckland, present day. We are following 3 young Pacifica Māori characters, women, over the period of a couple of days as they navigate the changing landscape of the city that they grew up in, the city that they once felt like they belonged in, and how that has changed over the years. This book is looking at the ways that colonisation and gentrification have affected these smaller communities within Auckland and wider Aotearoa, actually. This doesn't just apply, but I think it is more obvious in bigger cities, especially Auckland, where you have areas like the one that I live in right now that 30 years ago was mostly made up of Pacifica communities. This book is funny, this book is smart, this book looks at the ways that these characters are trying to educate themselves about what is going on around them. They're not passively letting it happen, but they're also trying to just, live their lives and not let themselves be bogged down by that heavy weight of colonisation and what it does. This book feels especially relevant to me and where I live and certain experiences and feelings that I have about being Māori, and I just think that it was really life-affirming to read a book like this in 2023 and have it be hopeful, important, have a really important message and still deliver it in a way that didn't feel all doom and gloom. I love this book so much. I'm so happy that I get to share it on this channel, because I know that a lot of people watching won't necessarily ever know about this book. So the more I can sing its praises and talk about how much I love it, the better. And if you can somehow get your hands on a copy, I really recommend that you do, because it's great and it's my best book of the year. That is it. All wrapped up in a nice, somewhat cohesive bow for you. I would love to hear what your favourite books of the year were. If you have any, or if you have just one, please let me know in the comments. Like I said earlier, massive thank you to everyone who's watched this year. I truly appreciate all of you, and I'm looking forward to another year on BookTube. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!